Hello and welcome to my screencast on multiplying and dividing positive and negative fractions. I want to start with some basics and some pictures. I'm going to start with a simple example like 1/2 times 1/3. Now, when I see that, I think of this as finding half of a third. What is half of a third? So I'm going to take that same chocolate bar rectangle from my adding and subtracting screencast, and I'm going to think, what is half of a third? So if I had thirds, and I took a third and I cut it in half, I'm going to cut all my thirds in half. Half of a third would be that much. And that looks like 1 out of 6 equal pieces. So half of a third must be 1/6. And if we think about the math that could get us there, I notice that 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 3 is 6. So that's our strategy. Multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. How about division? I'm going to take a half divided by a third. And what I want to think about here is how many thirds fit into 1/2. So if I go up to this picture, remember that 1/3 was these two pieces, these 2/6. That was a third. So I can see that there are 3/6 in a half. 2/6 is 1/3. 1/6 is half of a third. So I have 1 1/2 thirds inside of 1/2. Now it's harder to see what the math would be to get from here to here, but here's how it works. If I know that the opposite or inverse of division is multiplication, and I know that the inverse of 1/3 is 3, if I apply 2 inverses to this problem, that should get me back to where I started. Think about that. If the opposite of up is down, then the opposite of up gets us back up again. So if I take 2 opposites, I'm back where I started. So I'm going to do 1/2 times the reciprocal of 1/3, just 3 over 1. Now I use this strategy. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 1 is 2. I know that 3/2 is equivalent to 1 1/2. So there's our strategy for division. Multiply by the inverse of that second number. Now let's try some examples with negatives thrown in as well, since that's part of this screencast. I'm going to start with -2/5 divided by +3/10. I'm going to start with a division example. Our strategy was to multiply by the inverse, so I'm going to take -2/5 and multiply by 10/3. And here we go, we're going to multiply. I see a negative times a positive, and I remember from my integer rules that that is a negative product. Now I multiply. 2 times 10 is 20. 5 times 3 is 15. So I get -20/15. Not really done though, because I need to simplify. Let's see here. 20 and 15 both share factors of 5. 20 is 4 groups of 5. 15 is 3 groups of 5. 5 divided by itself, well, that's a big old 1. 3 times 1 is 3, 4 times 1 is 4, so this simplifies down to -4/3. I do want to make the point that we could have done some simplifying earlier in the problem. When I change it to multiplication, I have my groups of 5 and 10. I could simplify 5 and 10. 10 is 2 groups of 5. 5 is 1 group of itself. And notice that 2 times 2 is 4. 1 times 3 is 3. So we can always simplify earlier in the problem if possible. Let's do one more example, a little bit harder. We're going to multiply 2 mixed numbers. So I'm going to do -5 and 5/6 times -4 and 3/4. You might recognize these numbers from my adding and subtracting screencasts. So if I'm going to multiply 2 mixed numbers, I have to first convert them into improper fractions. So 6 times 5 is 30, plus 5 is 35. So I have -35/6 times 4 times 4 is 16, plus 3 is 19, so that's 19/4. Excuse me, the whole thing being negative. I'm just going to sneak the negative up there, because I learned in our previous screencast on adding and subtracting that that's the same as that. All right, now it's time to multiply. I'm going to look for chances to cross simplify. 35 and 6 don't share any factors. 35 and 4 don't share any factors. 19 and 4 don't share any factors. Neither do 19 and 6. So no cross simplify opportunities here. That bums me out because now I have to do 35 times 19. I'm going to calculator that one out really fast. That is 661. And that's all over 6 times 4. That's 24. I know the whole thing's positive because a negative times a negative equals a positive. I remember that from my integer screencast. And if we want, we could turn this into an a mixed number. Again, I'm going to use a little calculator magic to know that 24 goes into 661 27 times with 13 left over. So that could also be represented as 27 and 13 24ths. Though I personally don't have a problem with this improper fraction. All right, that has been my screencast on multiplying and dividing positive and negative fractions. Thank you for watching.